Welcome to the ReGen Ag Chat. My name is Liz Genever.
And I'm Nic Renison.
So this is the third of three of this series of when we've been talking to disruptors. So today is Antony Yousefian. And Nic, what did you get from Antony's chat?
I wasn't overly looking forward to Antony's chat, if I'm honest, Liz. Because you said, I've met this man and he's a techie and he's really interesting. So I was slightly not overly excited about it.
Not a fan of tech solutions, isn't
Not a fan of tech solutions, because I thought he was going to try and sell me daffodil dust and a pill to make everything all right. But he was a revelation, Liz. We talked about carbon and how the carbon kind of story doesn't really get traction, and how it's potentially
getting less traction now, possibly.
Yeah, and not really an effective kind of subject to drive change. Whereas we talked about health and how important that is going to be going forward, and how in the future we'll be able to zap our carrot with our phone and the truth will come out on the nutritional content of that carrot. So I really enjoyed it, and it was just speaking to someone who wasn't brought up in farming, has come into it. I find it really interesting that someone from the outside has come into our industry and is really passionate about it, even though sometimes on bad days I think, why would you want to be involved in this? But I think he can see the possibilities of the goodness we can have in the future. I really enjoyed it. It's a long one, isn't it, Liz?
Yes.
So it's maybe for a car journey. Do you think?
Yeah, definitely. A longish car journey. We're not going into Michael Blanche territory. This is a dangerous place to go.
If you're taking the kids swimming, don't listen to it then. If you're going like to a different county, that's when you want to listen to it.
Or putting some electric fencing up.
A lot of electric fencing, Liz.
Anyway,
what did you get from him?
This idea that you'll see the name of his business or the organization he set up is the First 30, and that refers to the 30 centimeters of soil. So he's really, really focused on soil health, and it's linked to human health and quality and all of those. So that was interesting. And this idea that it is about evidence and how do we build numbers and figures to help farmers develop businesses around it. And also that he is a venture capital investor, but as an organization, they look at nature-driven solutions. So this is not about necessarily magic pills. It's about how do we enhance nature's solutions to get us towards our goal quicker. And that's quite interesting. So they have a very fixed view of who they invest in. So that was interesting to hear about.
He mentioned the word nature a lot, didn't he? Which was reassuring, I think. But I was really chuffed that we had him on.
So Antony is a venture capitalist investor and has founded and scaled several startups in the agri-food tech scene, while spending a couple of years as an ag tech director at one of the UK's largest fruit growers. Antony is passionate about leveraging technology for good, especially for regenerating nature, such as enhancing soil health. He believes that strategic capital investment in nature regeneration represents the greatest economic opportunity of our lifetime. He is a partner of the First 30, which focuses on early-stage venture investments in applied artificial intelligence companies that showcase a link between nature and economic productivity. The First 30 refers to the first 30 centimetres of soil and links soil health to human health. They've supported a range of agri-tech companies like our friends Rumi, Audacious, which focuses on measuring nutrient density, Groundwork BioAg, which focuses on using mycorrhizae fungi to stabilise carbon in the soil.
So, Antony, let's begin at the very beginning. Could you tell us a little bit about your growing up, how you became to be on a podcast talking to Liz and I about soil?
Well, as soon as Liz said to me she wanted to talk to me about soil, that was like, red rag to a bull. So I was very excited by that. No, it's great to be here, and I really enjoy your podcasts previously. Anyway, so my journey kind of really always started in the financial markets. I was a trader, stock market trader, looking after pension monies, and it was sustainability was a big focus at that point in time. Kind of post financial crisis, money and capital was flowing there. Investors you and I, as pension holders, wanted to hold things for sustainable reasons, enabling the sustainable economy. But that kind of got my interest, and I saw that was essentially making money and doing good. So that kind of caught my interest as a trader. And as a trader, trading on information and data was key in terms of to have an edge. And it's no different, right, in farming. And then I went on to work for a Chinese investment bank. And the Chinese investment bank was, let's just say, backed by the Chinese government, Sovereign Wealth Fund. And they were also interested in sustainability, specifically around food. And they were looking into food security opportunities, but they were looking from a longer term perspective, probably longer than pension holders almost. So I thought that was really interesting. And this is at a time also then more and more money was falling under this ESG wrapper, sustainability wrapper. But we just couldn't find places to invest, to be honest, in the stock market. So I just, again, knowing that data and intelligence gave you an edge, I just thought, why aren't we using, where are the data feeds and understanding whether Microsofts and everyone else are they doing good or not? I could get real-time feeds and everything else, but I couldn't get real-time feeds on the environment, really, on understanding of someone's environmental footprint. So I just started to invest my own money into companies early stage. I thought this is where maybe sensing might be the thing, like measuring the environment, helping farmers, etc., kind of understand and measure, and the bottom of supply chains might be the opportunity. And that's how I fell into this world of agriculture and agricultural tech. And so back in 2015, I left the investment banking world or financial world to join an ag tech startup in the Netherlands called 30 Megahertz. And we were basically helping farmers, in terms of horticultural growers became our market, but helping them understand their environmental conditions inside the greenhouse, for example, using wireless sensors, taking sensors and making them wireless and then allowing them to see real time what's going on in their environment. Now, they could already do that with one or two sensors that was wired into their computers that was controlling their greenhouse. But because we enabled wireless sensing, arguably, you could get that kind of HD vision of multiple sensors, all monitoring the leaf temperature, measuring the vapor pressure deficit, all these, the water, the root zone. And that whole narrative then was feed the world, right? And I think a lot of this narrative has been feed the world and let's increase the yield. And we were doing that, arguably. We were helping farmers increase their yield year on year. But then I realized, despite increasing the yield, they weren't scaling with us. And I just saw that they gave that value to the supply chain. It's okay, they seem to be stuck here. Something's not working. And then I came across a set of growers who were very interested in our technology, who were growing for a different type of customer. They were growing for a pharmaceutical customer. And their optimization metrics, we can say, was yield, biomass, but also nutrient density. And then these ones weren't indoors. These ones were in soil. They were outside in a polytunnel and obviously in soil, and they were achieving higher yields, biomass, and high nutrient density. I was like, come on, who's lying here? Who's got the black, what's this black magic? What's this voodoo stuff you're doing? It's Antony, it's called soil health. And then I suppose that's when I fell down the rabbit hole of throwing all the puns out here, but down the rabbit hole of soil health, and then got introduced to John Kemp's work.
And at that point, yeah. but sorry, prior to that, were you completely naive to soil?
We started in arable anyway, and then it was like the market was indoors. Yeah, it was like I think being the Netherlands as well, the Netherlands and Dutch community are very much, this is the way of growing indoor production. it was just that it was all about yield. It's like yield, biomass, volume. And then these growers, the ones in soil, were optimizing for a different reason. It was actually nutrient density, because the more CB or cannabinoids or phytonutrients they made, the more money they got paid. And then I asked them, so if this plant here, which was basically a cannabis plant, right? It was for pharmaceutical, for epilepsy drug. If this is basically like a tomato plant, isn't it? And they're like, yeah, that's a good way to think about it, how you kind of grow this crop. So why don't we do this in food production? They said, you should. You should, but there's no incentive. And I just felt like, but what you're doing here, you're sticking carbon in the ground, you're increasing biodiversity, you're doing all the things that when I was back in the pension and investment market was what we wanted our kind of companies to be doing. That's the kind of the benefits they wanted them to be driving. The supply chain that was improving the environment, improving biodiversity, and let's just say increasing food security. So why don't we incentivize that? And they're like, there is an incentive. But I thought if I can measure that, if I can measure some of those outcomes, maybe I could then incentivize growers to do more of that. And that's kind of that whole narrative around measuring the outcomes of regenerative agriculture. And then, showing this a different product, right? So then I decided to found my own business. I kind of got approached by a local family farm here in Kent, who also had a shared vision of that. They were, let's just say, scaling up to meet supermarket demand on apples, but they needed to differentiate. And I was like, well, I think you can differentiate with a regenerative apple, for example, but we need to measure and validate that and show that this product is different. So I incubated an idea called the business is called BX, and I founded a business inside the large apple farm here, and just built that business with a great team. It's still going to today. And I've learned a lot there as well in terms of, let's just say scaling up a tech business inside a farm, but then also understanding deeply the intricate relationships within the food system and the problems that exist there. And then on that journey, I suppose was really also disappointed with early stage venture investors in this space. I suppose didn't understand farming well. Not saying I do, but I've kind of come at it from two angles now. Been on farm, been trying to build two businesses. Worked closely with the supply chain, but I thought if I could share that knowledge now into helping other startups in this space go faster, quicker. So that's why now I'm on the other side, back on the investment side, and investing now into these startups, trying to help them develop products to kind of transform the food system, arguably to make it more resilient and healthy, more importantly.
But with the cannabis example, we can say the word. It's like it's sort of illegal. Anyway, it's not. Sort of is. Anyway, moving on. But with cannabis, so there is it's measuring it. So they harvest it. Then do they measure the amount of the product they after, and then they get paid on that, or how does the payment or incentivize work in that system?
Yeah, as I understand. So you obviously want to generate as much biomass as possible. So you harvest it, and then when they when they've harvested, then they're kind of measuring the quality of it. So, for example, they're able to then measure the cannabinoid levels inside it, the THC levels, the CBD levels inside it, and their customer has a specification, but basically would pay more for more cannabinoids. And as I understand, for a plant to produce cannabinoids or phytonutrients, is another way, or flavonoids, the way to think about it is the plant needs to get to a very high level of health to get there. And so to achieve that high level of health, what I saw when I started looking into that as well was like to get the plant into that high level of health, you just had to have a really good root zone, right? And the ones indoors, I had customers doing this indoors, right? And they were using a lot of inputs to get the plant there, right? But these ones outside had hardly any inputs. They were just in the soil. I had obviously, made sure their soil was incredibly healthy, and it was getting there. It was getting to the levels, if not better levels, with minimal inputs. But as I started to understand the dynamics of getting plants to the high level of plant health, the photosynthesis was incredibly more efficient. There's more photosynthesis. So how was I helping to kind of measure and understand what that cannabinoid level was? It was understanding, what's the photosynthesis rates? You could do that with certain sensors. They're expensive sensors, but we made them wireless, essentially giving that insight. Was the plant constantly photosynthesizing? Was there enough water in the root zone? Was there enough minerals in those root zone? And there are sensors out there to do that. So these growers were using some of our sensors to kind of it was on one plant, to be clear, to kind of get that understanding. But
you're basically measuring the plant's happy, and therefore the outcome of the plant being happy is you've got higher, it produces more flavonoids.
Yeah, I think that, you can't get healthy soils. Also, I've come to learn without, it's a symbiotic relationship. The plant is like the solar panel driving energy down into the root zone, feeding all that microbes and life down there. So if you've got a healthy plant, I think also John Kemp talks about it as well, right? He says, you can't have healthy soils without healthy plants. So a healthy plant also feeds more energy into the soil. More energy in the soil, it creates more life down there, feeds more activity down there, releases more nutrients, then it pushes back up to the plant and makes that more healthy. So it's a symbiotic relationship. Healthy soils, or healthy plants, healthy soils. Guess what? Healthy people.
No shit.
It's simple, isn't it? Yeah.
But it's a concept, yes. It's then really difficult to do in reality. But
sure, of course.
But with your apple example, so what are you then? So similar sensors being used on an apple tree. Is it the same approach that you're using there?
I mean, what we did there was just simply, the farm was definitely a conventional farming system, and there was an acceptance that we needed to change. And so some of the orchards, they started to kind of remove the inputs completely, and obviously started to drive some regenerative practices. For example, cover crops in the alleyways. Obviously ending all the sprays and everything else like that. So that's what we were doing. And obviously then I was using some of that equipment just to monitor some of those trees and to understand what was kind of, are we seeing that kind of improvements as well? For example, we were measuring around the tree stem itself and seeing that, the activity of the xylem, taking up water, for example. And guess what? No surprise, but the trees that were kind of in a better, let's just say, in a regenerative system, seemed to be outperforming photosynthesis wise as well. But I mean, one of the easy things that we saw, this is kind of going slightly off it, but when it rained, the tree went to sleep for like 5 days. Like it didn't photosynthesize for a few days, or it was too windy, right? It's like the tree or the plant protects itself, right? And we used to, that system used to spray fungicides, right? As soon as it rained. So obviously I'm this kind of guy from the city who has never really done farming. I suppose I was always asking the hard questions. I was like, so hold on, when it rains, you instantly go out there and spray fungicide because you're worried about it raining on the apple tree. It's not natural. But obviously this is where this industry's got to in this fear of all these risks. I was like, so if we stop it from raining, in other words, cover the apple tree like you do in horticulture, you wouldn't need the fungicides. They're like, so let's do it. We did this experiment, basically. We had like 1 hectare of like tunnels over the apple trees to prove that, again, you didn't need to go in with all these inputs. They were irrigating anyway, with drip irrigation anyway. So then you could redesign the orchard, basically a regenerative orchard, which would probably be more trees, but you design it for carbon sequestration, for example. You don't need the tractor, or you could have a smaller tractor that kind of goes through it. But the photosynthesis rate was through the roof compared to the outside trees. So then your establishment rate is faster, your full production is faster. So everything starts to pay off. But at the same time, you can then market that fruit as something else. And that's what we started to measure on the nutrient density side, was even just 1 year of removing all the sprays. We had one example of one orchard that basically had a massive lift in the nutrient profile of just removing all these sprays that would put on there. Some of these sprays were put on there to kind of kill the tree, right? To not kill the tree, but to make the tree feel like you've got a fruit now, or you've got to kind of you've got to get ready for harvest. And again, removing that, we saw like a marked difference in the vitamin A and vitamin C levels, like 30-40% uplift. But then that story was never told to the supermarket or to the buyer, right? And that's where the opportunity lay, really, is what we were experimenting with. Was obviously, one, doing different production system, hopefully more profitable, but two, going back to the cannabis example, is marketing the product as a completely different product. And I think that is the opportunity for this food system, is the food is health or food is medicine narrative. These are different products.
Yeah,
because I suppose the challenge in all of that is proving, isn't it? To be a consistently higher, to be able to put it on a label, it needs to be proven. All that, and that, I suppose, is that Are you thinking the monitoring and allows us to do that without having to write it on a label? Does that make sense? It's trying to prove it in real time, isn't it? It's what we're trying, or what you're looking to do.
It don't have to be real time. I genuinely think so. Obviously, our venture fund, the first 30, so we invest early stage. I think you've mentioned a couple of our investments on your actual podcast, actually, but one of them is Audacious. They're basically measuring nutrient density of food or ingredients. Now the problem is you've always been able to do this in, like, you can send your food or product off to Yousefian's lab, for example, but it costs a lot to do that. And so what Audacious is doing is they're kind of making that lab test go from like £3,000 down to £3. And if you can make that ability to measure that nutrient density of that meat, the milk, or the grain, whatever it may be you're kind of growing, if you can make it incredibly low cost, then you can make that data point ubiquitous throughout the food system, from on the shelf through to the processing to on farm.
But how are they making it? How are they dropping that price?
Sure. Yeah, so normally the lab test is a very destructive lab test, right? That's another problem. So you send your food in, you can't send all your batch in and they destroy it, right? But they're utilizing like multi-spec, infrared, hyperspectral cameras, for example, sensors, sorry, to kind of to get a reflectance back from that product, and then they're building the model. So they've done the destructive test to get the wet lab test, and then they're kind of shining it with the light to get a reflectance, and then they're understanding the kind of the information coming back from the light to kind of build a model to understand, oh, that means calcium. And eventually, the more testing they're doing, the models are getting more and more accurate. And so much so you then don't need to do the destructive manual wet lab test. It's expensive. You can just point a sensor at it and get the number. And as soon as you can do that, then you can just upload that eventually. Why not to your phone? Your phones have got sensors and capabilities on them, or they will do. It could be as easy as that in the future. But today we have this technology there, these infrareds. We use them on farming and agronomy, but just don't have the models to understand what that means. And that's what Audacious is actually building, is making the models. So that's,
is there something in the current food system with the supermarkets and all the buyers and processors? Do they want this information, or is this information potentially not great for them? Because if you could zap your apple to say, and it would identify how many times it had been sprayed and the nutrient density of it, is there something in not wanting to go there currently?
I think there's some participants who would not want that to be unearthed. Certain people with certain I'm not pointing fingers or anything else like that, but what I've seen in my experience, let's just take supermarkets, and I'm not, if anything, they are making efforts, but they're always looking for a silver bullet. And they've eliminated got lots of products in there, and they're very scared or worried about one product, saying that this one is incredibly rich. And then the consumer going, well, what about all these other ones then? I'm not going to touch these. So they're always looking for that one thing that lifts all solution, like carbon. Hence they like carbon, because they can commodify it and they can apply it to everything. But the truth is, I think what we're all saying here is nature's never the same. That's one thing I've learned. Right? Soil is never the same in one place. The product that comes off the farm is never the same. It's always differentiated. In other words, we've commodified the food system, and we need to now decommodify it, go back to accept it's all different from different places and different locations. It's complex. Nature's complex. So they're not fungible. They're different things, and they need to be different prices. And so obviously those players who run that commodified system are very not too interested in what you're saying there, Nick, is really decommodifying that. So I think you've got to find those buyers who are interested in a decommodified food system. In other words, wants to make, let's just say, food is health, food is medicine. I think that's the pathway. There will be entities who want to take volume and market share. And like from what I see, like all of us with families and kids, no one wants to poison themselves. No one wants to. So we can unearth this information. I think those who do it and those who run with it will take market share and take volume. And I think we're becoming, all of us in the regenerative movement or this definitely what's happening. I've seen that this it's just a no-brainer. It just makes complete sense. It's no, as you said earlier, no shit. It is true, but it's just so compelling. So we are at a moment where technology is making this accessible. It's enabling the complexity to be augmented or shown. And I think that's the positive thing about where technology can be used to kind of unearth the stories or the narrative. But us as humans can't deal with too many pieces of information in our head. I know that. Certainly as men certainly can't. I know that. So that's why I think we are in the next 5 to 10 years in this paradigm shift of where we're moving from quantity to quality focused. And there's no excuse anymore on you can't do it because the technology is there to do it. And admittedly, when I was doing it in 2015, 16, 17, it was harder. It was fundamentally harder to kind of the cost of doing those things were harder. I mean, the cost of computing, the cost of the equipment. And we can reference ChatGPT or AI. We are in a point in moment where this is now really accessible, where all three of us on here can go to ChatGPT and have an assistant to deal with that complexity. We just need to have the data is not there, to be clear, to kind of feed that GPT or LLM, but we can get into that.
So fast forwarding, say 5 years. So we're hoping, because I always in this part of the conversation, I always think it's going to be for the people who can afford it, or that are making or able to make choices. And similarly, people can make choices now, can't they? They can buy from local producers if they choose to, or not. So for me, it's how do we get it at scale, but also accessible? That's the bit that always intrigues me. And it might not be 5 years, might not be the right amount of time.
Yeah, I suppose it's always the argument which I think people point towards. We can't. This is only going to be for the rich. But if we just again take a step back and think about, 30%, 40% of food is wasted anyway. There's that part. We know regenerative agriculture from the perspective of that it is arguably cheaper to produce, but it's a different product again. So again, nutrient density, the quality, if we just take the meat example that Audacious is going to show in January when they launch with their first, they've done a kind of a benchmark of all the meat out there in beef, should we kind of say, in the US market. And it's going to show that grass-fed beef is incredibly nutrient rich, significantly rich, in other words, like omega-3 rich. Omega-3 being it's something we need, but it's omega-3 is anti-inflammatory for our bodies, where the other meat, the conventional meat, is very omega-6 rich, which is arguably inflammatory. Omega-6 is inflammatory for our bodies, but you need omega-6 and omega-3. But the animals that are on pasture, the animals that are plant-based, that just eat plants, eating healthy plants, they're healthy. We should be eating that one. And then if you think about the true food cost, and we know this in the UK, it's been talked more and more and more, there's a really good, was it out from the farming commission? I can't remember what the name of the report came out recently, but it basically sorry, say again?
Food and Farming Commission? Yes.
They had a really good report, recommend looking at it, but it basically says we spend 250 billion a year basically on illnesses from food in our country. Hold on, didn't we just do a load of tax rises recently because to 20, 30 billion to give to the NHS to kind of deal with the food crisis? Hold on, the problem is 250 billion. So there's a value proposition for you in terms of saving money. The government should be subsidizing, the government should be just incentivizing this way of production. And you can save over 100 billion, arguably. Now that 100 billion is direct costs. It's also indirect costs. It's people being sick, unproductive, not in the workplace, claim benefits. It's all it is. But that number continues to skyrocket. Yet here we are marginally, continually to take money away from farming industry when the business case is absolutely clear. So I don't really buy into the narrative that this way of production is more expensive and it's only for the rich. Totally disagree. You can the government has the power to do large scale offtake agreements to this way of production. And yeah, you should only be able to buy, let's just say, the dirty inflammatory product in the supermarkets. But then, I don't know, you can put, if you want to get the good stuff, you have to go to school. Your school canteen can have it, or it's in the NHS. But then they create the competition for that product as well, right? So the government should buy it all up and give it to the people. I'm not a what's called a socialist or anything like that, but I'm just like, there is power here, and the evidence is clear. Just need someone brave enough to kind of step up and do it. But I still think private industry will do it first, and they should do it. And it's a great competitive advantage. So it's my long-winded answer, Liz, for
for me, it is the procurement one's a really interesting one. So we were having at last year's conference, someone from Northumberland County Council came, and they're really trying to understand how to procure food between, as you say, schools, hospitals, could be between Ministry of Defence, all of that stuff. How do you procure this superfood going into that generation of people? It's incredible. The opportunity is amazing. As you say, it just needs someone who's brave enough. And their challenge is, how do you define it?
Yeah.
So do you define it just on what the practices that farmers doing, or do you have some form of measurement, a sample? We see it within the grain industry. Those doing the sampling points are going in to see which line that grain is going through. So we know it can happen within the supply chain already.
That's what needs to happen. Is that point of measurement there, like the grain industry? I think you can do practices, but I think Audacious are showing that it's not really. If you use practices as your indicator, it's not going to be true. It's a long-term indicator, but basically the strong link is soil health. In other words, the health of the soil is incredibly linked to the nutritional quality of the product. And all I've learned is it takes a long time to get soil health there. So all this kind of regenerative greenwashing, I'll just ask that individual or company to say, okay, show us the soil health measurement of your farmers, and show me that field boundary you got that product from, which they can't half the time, and show me the soil health measurement there. And then you can kind of make these claims. I think that's where it'll end up anyway. But this is where it's the advantage for those who have been doing it. Like, if you've been improving your soil health for a long time, it's going to take years for everyone else to catch up. So you can arguably get a better offtake agreement, but it's about getting those off-takers as well. So as you say, Liz, we need more off-takers.
So it could be, to access a market, you need to provide a soil health sample from those fields that you're grazing or growing crops in. So that could be an access to that market, and then the proof is in when those products are delivered and then measured again. I
think, I would just simply, if I was a buyer, I'd roll out a protocol, which was just simply, you need to tell me you need to be able to give me the polygon of where that came from. I don't know, the RPI number, and then give me a relatively soil health measurement. And then we can easily do that quite cheaply. Actually, we can actually do. Yes, you could take a soil sample, but you could use something like Earth observation, NPP, which is net photosynthesis productivity. I'm probably murdering it now. But you can kind of see that basically over time, the photosynthesis productivity is increasing. You can see that reflectance. It's a very cheap way of doing it. So I'm very cautious and conscious of not putting onerous costs on the farmer. But anyway, once you see the product that comes off that field, it will be a different kind of product, and you can charge a different price in the market anyway. And then that you'd realize, I need to secure that field boundary and that farmer, because it's the best one in that area. And I'm going to put that into my nutritious line, however you want to market it. But it's just simply tracing it, measuring it and tracing it. But most of these, as I understand, the processing and everything else like that, it's those players there who are in the middle, who have kind of built this kind of commodified system, which kind of obviously puts it all into one vat or into one processing place, which then we lose the traceability. There's no excuse for losing it, but there's an incentive to lose it, I believe, at this point in time. But I think as you've seen the likes of Wild Farmed, arguably what they're doing is rebuilding that supply chain. It's like saying, we know where it came from. We know what they did. The one thing they're probably missing at the moment is just that soil health measurement, which I know they're working on. And they're going to show very soon, hopefully, that bread line, that bread is nutritious versus anything else on the shelf. And then I think we'll see a really good experiment there of what happens to consumer demand. And then everyone wants to be in that specific line of bread or that flour. But there'll be a conventional flour or a transition flour, which will probably be, I'm guessing what they're doing, by the way.
Just going back a stage. So the company Audacity.
So Audacious.
Audacious.
Yeah.
Audacity is
I like that. I like Audacity.
That's an a podcast editing tool. Audacious. Just go back a step and explain how you maybe got involved with them and how venture capital, is that the right word?
Venture capital,
how that works. So because there'll be lots of people just farming away, milking cows, scraping poo out of a shed, and think this is a whole different world. Could you just explain that in kind of, so I could understand, which has got to be very simple.
Oh yeah, it's simply investing for high return. So I suspect all of us, or majority of us, have some sort of a pension investment, right? Which then is probably deployed or invested into the stock market. And stock market probably give you a kind of return on the year. If you put £100 in, it probably give you back £110. It's probably like 10% return. It's higher than the interest rate. The interest rate may be 3-4%. Stock market maybe 10%. Now, venture capital is looking for a return 30% or more. So it's really highest. It's arguably the highest return you can get, but it's also the highest risk. Now, but we are investing in companies that are not on the stock market. So they're not public. The information isn't out there to make the analysis, but it's private companies that could eventually be listed on the stock market, but they're very much private companies. So we don't have that information there. We have to kind of go find these companies. We then have to kind of do the research on them. Are they the right technologies? Are they the right teams? And we're specifically doing this as a venture firm early. So like idea stage, kind of just getting going, concept. And I suppose we're able to do it in this space because I suppose we've been in it for 10 plus years as founders ourselves. There's 3 of us on the fund, and we've all been technology founders, we want to say, and builders in this space. And I think that's what we try and add value of. We can help these startups who have got ideas and initial products. They've started testing on farm, or the solution starting to work. So we invest at that seed stage. So I think we talked about it before. You sent me a message saying, is it like Dragon's Den? Arguably, yeah, Dragon's Den is a kind of correct stage of when these ideas are at, when we invest. I think we do a lot more due diligence than Dragon's Den. So we will spend a lot of time with the founders and the team to understand them, get to know them, and do our research and understanding that technology. But I suppose we come with the experience of doing it early, but then also the industry experience. And we're surrounded with an amazing group of advisors, from farmers to scientists to technology specialists. And a general network as well, to be clear, of just people. So yeah, one is, how did we find Audacious? Again, we have our thesis of when we're investing, of what we think is going to happen in the next 10 years. Sorry, just to clarify, so we invest early, a high return, but we invest now, but then look to get a return in 10 years. That's venture capital. So we have a long-term horizon. When the stock market, you can invest in Apple today, and then you can sell tomorrow if you really want to. We can't do that in venture. We invest like now.
So you don't get any return until 10 years.
The fund says people put the money in the fund, and then we say to them, we will be looking to liquidate or sell those positions around 10 years time. Okay. We can extend to 12 years, but usually what happens in that time, we hope that happens, is that company gets acquired. So when that company gets acquired, then we obviously sell our shares, and then we can get the money back to the investors. That could happen in year 2, 3, but usually happens towards the later stage. That's why we can go early. Let's just say Audacious is worth 10 million today. But it's then, if we're right about this industry is going to move to this quality metric and nutrient density measurement, everyone starts using it, they could be worth arguably billions in the future.
You'll be millionaires, Rodney.
Well, I don't think
they already
we'll be
are.
millionaires.
Just saying.
But if we're right, what our thesis is that regenerative agriculture enables, it's like it only happens if farming becomes this, those with healthy soils, their cash flow completely changes. They've got better offtake agreements, right? The value of the land goes up. Everything else just becomes, that business becomes more profitable. Then, the companies that we're investing in, the enabling technologies, we're looking to the enabling technologies who makes this story true. Right? We have a thesis that this is going to happen and it's imminent, but we're betting on those companies that can make this to accelerate that transition of like regenerative agriculture. So we have a long-term horizon. But to be clarified, say we invest in 25 companies, you're expecting to lose like 18, 17 of those companies will go bust in that time as well.
But the ones that don't.
But the ones that don't, as you said, Nick, go to like, $1 billion or something like that. That's the kind of the aim. And then they get a return. But the positive thing is if this happens, what actually happens is people go, oh, wow, look, regenerative agriculture is happening. It's a thing. More money floods into the space and it becomes so we'll do fund 2, fund 3, fund 4, and we can kind of support more. And that's what's happening now is we're seeing investors realize and recognize that this is the opportunity because it's at the nexus of climate. It's at the nexus of human health, more importantly, and social. It's like it's a no-brainer place to deploy capital, if you ask me.
So I listened to a podcast called Hungry, and they interviewed a chap from Big Fish. Have you heard of Big Fish?
No.
So he's like a marketeer, and he works with brands, like challenger brands like Goo and Dorset cereals and Bold Bean and all those kind of people. But so but previously, I think he's quite old, this chap. But previously, he was like hardcore, make money, get rich, push. And now he's so yesterday he was on. Talking about ReGen Ag, and he's been to America and Europe and stuff. But it was really interesting how and I guess it's Liz for us in our kind of with our wellies on. It's good to hear that there's people like Antony, bright young things.
You think I'm young?
Thinking
Fantastic.
thinking about ReGen, isn't it? I mean, who thought
it's sexy at the moment. Andy Cato and the Groundswell lot, isn't it?
What about you two? You're not making it sexy?
Not today.
We look like we've had a Hoover up our bum today, just tired and exhausted.
I think is the challenge is to keep that interest, isn't it? So where is the net? Where are they going to? My interpretation is where will they flit to next? Because it feels like this quite transient. This is the cool place at the moment. Next time will be robotics. I don't know. Do you mean it could be that I'm being mean?
But don't you think there's the health side? There's so much to go on with the health and like the Zoe app.
And your point about the Ozempic or equivalent, do you mean jab of that, the value of them as companies now?
Yeah, we talked about this, I think, on the panel, didn't we?
Yeah.
And you and I were on a panel together with Unilever. I think, what was the comment? I think maybe it might have even been that comment about the business case, I think it was, of doing regenerative agriculture. But yeah, so again, going back to the stock market, if you ask your pension holder or whoever's looking after your pension, are you holding the stock Ozempic? Because not Ozempic, holding Novo Nordisk. Novo Nordisk is now the most valuable company in Europe, right? And they make a jab. Well, they make lots of pharmaceutical products, but the one that's doing really well is Ozempic or Wegovy, which is, even our UK government is looking at it at the moment, which is basically you take it every day or every other day and it stops you eating food or reduces your appetite. I think that's absolutely crazy, right? That this is the stock market is basically saying, I think this company could be worth a lot of money because it's helping people live longer. That's their narrative of like, use our thing because it basically reduces obesity, reduces chronic disease. which is the blight on everyone's productivity and the healthcare service. This is the narrative that all of the food industry or the regenerative agricultural industry should be saying. This is the opportunity. It's like, well, now here is the business case for the food companies and the supply chain and growers that you should go and basically build this supply chain because you could become the value of Ozempic. Novo Nordisk, keep saying Ozempic, but Novo Nordisk. And that's like, I haven't checked recently, but I think it's worth like 400 billion. And the nearest food companies worth like 20, 30 billion, like it's 10 times the value. So the business case is there in the boardroom of those food companies and supermarkets to kind of change their supply chain now. Before, I think climate was a narrative, but it didn't have the business case. And I experienced that as well, to be fair. Like again, when I was building BX, we were measuring the carbon, measuring the numbers. And when we came to negotiation, let's just say we'll have the conversation with the supermarket, didn't see any evidence of them truly wanting any carbon number. But what they did want was like, oh, but this, you're saying this apple is different or it's less risk? We're like, yeah, I can basically validate it's got 0 emissions on it with like low cost. Okay, that's good enough. Let's enter into a long-term agreement. And I was like, why am I putting all this effort into quantifying this carbon number, which is incredibly hard and it's always changing? And there's actually no interest in it in the supply chain truly. And they can't even sell it anyway. They can't even make money off it. So if they can't make money off it, they're not going to potentially want it. So there's a lot of this. So I just became convinced that actually quantifying carbon, and this is just one case. And then I've spent some time post that startup inside food companies. I've had a bit of time with Walmart. I've had a bit of time with PepsiCo and some commodity traders and basically helping them with their supply chain traceability, visibility. There's no budget truly. And I'm saying this bluntly, that they're like, the budget is minimal and there is limited business case to kind of do carbon in the supply chain from what I see. But there is very much interest in something that increases their revenue and allows them to sell more. And I see evidence that selling on health is that opportunity. And again, they won't get any other way of doing that other than sourcing from soil health. This is the opportunity for regenerative agriculture, where in the carbon side, we get into this kind of, intensification's better because we can stick all the cows in one shed and or the greenhouse production. It's all in, it's the land versus land sparing argument, but we can get into that as well. But still, the health side, I don't think they can't compete. There's no competition when soil health is incredibly high. You've got a completely different product. It's nutrient rich, and that's where processors to the supply chain partners can arguably take market share by giving consumers, or us as consumers, things that make us more productive, more healthy, and allow us to live longer. So that is the opportunity, health over climate, I think.
I saw an advert the other day which was about, the title of it is food grown supplements. And my point was like, isn't that just food? It's that we've grown the food, we've then extracted it, we've put it in a tablet, and then you can have it. It's like, why can't we just do it with food?
We've lost the definition of food, I think. Yeah, the definition of what food is being kind of, it's when people, I always have a problem sometimes when people say, there's X number of food is this and that. I'm like, can we just agree on what do you think food is? Because if you're including those packets of crisps and stuff like that, the food security argument and everything else like that, there's not enough calories. I'm like, can we just clarify what you think food is? And I think the ultra processed food argument or narrative that's coming through at the moment is, I think Liz, you talked about on a previous podcast, if you turn the back of a packet and you can't understand those ingredients, then I don't think it should be classed as food. It's certainly ultra processed food, ultra processed, what's it called? Product, substance, or something like that. It shouldn't be called food. And maybe that's an opportunity in itself and redefining what is classified as food.
So it's this idea of focusing on health, wellness type attitude, or the marketability of that as a product, rather than, the carbon story is still there, isn't it? It still has to be in the background because of reducing costs and various factors. But as you say, it's not, people are not engaging with it as much as we previously. It
can be the byproduct, I suspect, as you say, that it's the narrative or how do we sell this regenerative agriculture into the supply chain? I think you're right. selling it on carbon doesn't go. It's just so intangible, right? It's like, what is carbon? It's like, I don't really can't do much with it, right? It's just like, I can't even see it.
I was once, I did some work within a supply chain and was asked whether it was coal, so it would like drop out of the atmosphere like coal, and I was like, not quite. See,
Yeah, exactly.
and that's with someone who was engaged within food systems, so it is slightly terrifying.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what I found as well. And I've then gone in deep into these carbon conversations, and I don't sit here and say like I know it inside out, but you ask the expert. I ask the sustainability managers in the supply chain, what do you want? And they can't give you a straight answer. And they refer to methodologies, and there's definitely complete confusion of what everyone wants. And then even the calculations are really, everyone's doing different calculations. And then the data that they're using, some of them are using good data, some are using poor. So it's just like, and they're using averages and averages. I'm like, we're not going to get there on carbon. It's just like, yeah, unless I see the day when someone gets fined or litigated on carbon, then maybe you might get. I just don't think it stands up in court, because you've got poor quality data or your averages are not great. I just think it's just messy. But what is clear, like if you know where it came from and you know what quality it is, in other words, nutrient, the outcomes of it, then there's no argument on that. I can measure those outcomes. But carbon is something which is just always changing. So I'm very cautious on the carbons, playing the carbon play. But what we all know is like, yeah, we need more carbon in the soil, which then makes more space for more water. The whole story. But we definitely need carbon in the soil, but it's not the thing that sells on. But what consumers want, or consumers are very interested in, is, does it make me better? Does it make me more healthy? Does it allow my children to thrive? That sells. That definitely sells. Who wouldn't want to kind of have their children to grow up and live longer, or you to live long enough to kind of see them grow up? I think the health is the opportunity.
I suppose the follow on from that, and that links to both, doesn't it? Which is the bovia, I can never pronounce it, bovia, the additive query that came. So it was introduced within a milk supply chain for carbon benefits, but people have are concerned about the disbenefits of it being then found in the milk, which it isn't. But people have had I suppose it's produced quite a lot of furore that probably wasn't expected when they put loads of press releases out to say, oh, we're changing the world.
Yeah, I think how I read it is, I think generally all of us are like just fed up. I think a lot of us are becoming more aware of people messing with the food system, or the food system is not working for us, really. It's clearly not working for us. And there's a lot of consciousness. So I think it's more of that. People can point out, this isn't information. I think it's just a general out of touch supply chain with what people want. And yeah, advocating on the climate reason is probably wasn't a good communication strategy. I think you didn't understand your consumer very, very well if they suddenly, utilizing this. I just think it was just a poorly done. But yeah, in terms of, I just don't get it personally. I don't get this from what I've seen. That I'm just a person who's not a scientist. I'm just someone who just looks at the information, and I have strong views, but I can change them. And the data and the evidence that I see is that, yeah, if you have healthy soils, you get healthy plants, animals eating healthy plants equals healthy animals. And if we eat those animals, we'll be healthy. Now, here we are putting a feed additive, an artificial thing, to an animal which stops it from doing its natural process of methane, basically burping methane. Now, I think going back to the carbon thing, I think it's unfair. Let's just keep on the methane, but let's assume we've got optimized for methane. I think it's really, I don't think all methane is equal. You can't, the methane that's coming out of the animal that's on natural systems is part of the natural kind of biogenic cycle. So like the methane that comes from the cow turns to CO2 eventually after like 10 years, and then essentially goes back to the plant, sucks in from the plant, goes into the soil, and then the cow then goes into another plant and the cow eats again. So that's a natural cycle. That's been happening for millions and millions of years. Herbivores, not just cows, have been doing this, right? Then there's, which I think what Bovaer has been designed for, is for the industrialized, intensified system, which is indoors, animals that are not on land. These animals are burping inside, elementally. They're eating crops which aren't, or probably human edible crops. So yes, we could potentially be growing something else in those places, arguably. And then that's kind of bad methane. So we should be quantifying that, but you can't include the methane, I don't think, that comes from that animal, as well as we do not have a great understanding of some of the natural methane oxidizers, like the hydroxyl radicals. So as I understand, the thing that basically turns methane back into CO2, kind of oxidizes it, that seems to appear where there's water. And we know when plants in the morning start, the sunlight comes onto them, they start respiring, and sunlight, water, hydroxyl radical, that's the thing that supposedly oxidizes methane. And that's an abundance on pasture. And we've seen evidence that trees are actually taking in methane. So we're still learning on that. So I think the calculations are poor anyway, generally. Data is weak anyway, basically, in that space. So, okay, fine. So I'm now saying don't include the pasture one, but okay, the indoor one. So we're basically reducing the methane emissions for the indoor cow. Now, again, from what we've seen from the data that I've seen, animals that are on natural systems are healthier. They're blood markers. From what we see in this company we're investing into called Antler Bio, who basically are measuring the gene expression, or look at the blood markers, like the proteins that have been expressed from our genes in the animal's blood. We should do this on humans, by the way. We do it on humans, but and they're bringing it arguably to the cows. They're showing that these animals in more natural environments, these animals with better management systems, are not stressed, they're not sick, they're producing more yield. And so it's kind of pointing towards, guess what? Animals and the outside and the natural environments are superior in yield and quality and in health. It's the one indoors who are kind of more sick. So we're giving this feed additive to an indoor system, and then also I don't know who's going to pay for it. I'm very much sure the farmer's going to have to pay for this feed additive. I don't believe in the end that Gala or whoever will pay for it. I don't believe that's going to be true. Eventually, it'll be on. So you're basically paying, I don't know, $50 a cow, whatever it's going to be, $40 a cow, or in dollars, but pounds a cow, and just to reduce methane by 20-30%. Antler Bio has shown us that you can actually just changing management practices, more outside, whatever it may be. There's a range of things that you can do. It's not all the same. You can basically, they showed us one use case the other day where they 50 head of herd, which is kind of, I think a half indoors or half outdoors, but a few changes to that hygiene and additive, basically their feed regime and water. They basically lifted their yield for this small farmer by 50-60%. Now, from a carbon and methane emissions perspective, that's far superior to this Bovaer thing, right? And you've got a better product, and you just put money in the pocket of the farmer. I just don't understand why you would ever even contemplate the feed additive. I think there's quite clearly inefficiencies still in the system.
But I think I was at the Labour Party conference on a panel with a company and a farmer, because farmers sometimes love this quick fix idea. And it was all to do with daffodil extract that was going to reduce methane. I'm not sure if they're still around, but you could see the government, it was the Labour Party, so I don't know what their thoughts are on it now, but they were lapping it up that this bit of daffodil dust was going to sort out the methane problem. And it's a little bit like the obesity drug. It's quick fix, isn't it? It's a sticker. And a few people will make a lot of money out of it. And I guess when Liz said to me, I met a tech man on a panel, I thought, oh, flipping heck. Because this, to me, that's the you hear a lot about the daffodils and the obesity drugs, and that's the tech that is. But I guess what you're saying is there's good tech out there that is using the very best of what nature can do and identifying what nature can do. And that's the bit that I'm really relieved to hear.
nailed it. I think that's exactly that. I think nature I think if you let nature do its thing, it's the most capitalist the R&D that nature's done for the last 4 billion years, I think we kind of like to say, is incredibly high, right? But like, there's an incredible amount of IP in nature and an advantage. We just don't understand it. I think we only understand like 1 or 2% of the species in the soil. Like, and I'm seeing these companies now starting to understand. There's a really cool company up north in Edinburgh called ReGen, and they're basically harvesting all the fungal species that are out there in forestry. And they're starting to really understand, obviously, the different mycorrhizal fungi basically in different areas. And they're building this library. And they're really understanding fungi, fantastic fungi. And they've even now discovered a strain which can basically eat up nitrogen. So they're basically going to put this strain on rocks in the waterways and basically clean up the waterways of nitrogen. Like, we just don't even understand what some of these fungus can do, basically. And there's so much potential. Look at that product, using nature's advantage to have a competitive edge. So yeah, I think we can use technology. When I go back to AI, we definitely know in nature there's all these variables, as you know, as farmers. This was one thing I suppose when I was a stock market trader, I had all these screens and data points coming at me. I was like, all these feeds. It's the same thing arguably on farming, but you don't have those feeds on the screen. You just, you're using your own intelligence to make the assessment. We just don't have those feeds on nature at the moment. It is always changing. And I think everyone wants a formula. Everyone wants the one single thing, but that's a kind of almost ignorance of understanding biology. Like, it's always changing. There's always the interactions. There's wars. There's effectively in the soil happening. So we just got to be managers and risk manage, which I know you both do this really, really well. And that's where I think we can use the power of AI to see real time how the weather's changing, how the soil's changing, and deal with that complexity and manage around it and work with it. And that's exactly what farmers do. And it's just using that tooling to understand what decisions to make. But there's never going to be a silver bullet from what I've learned. It's going to require an aggregation of lots of solutions. But that's why I generally like these kind of technologies like Antler Bio, for example, who are looking at the complexity of our genome, or the animal's genome, putting in all the variables that that cow has felt from the weather, the feed, and everything else like that, and trying to understand, why is that gene expressing and that one's not? Gene expression is elementally, just to kind of quickly go back and explain gene expression. If Nick, you and I were twins, identical twins, I'm in Kent, you're up north, I basically could essentially, when I'm living down here, I could get cancer and you don't, because I turned on the gene for my environment that gave me cancer. And basically, so gene expression basically explains 90% of performance or outcomes. But here we have an industry obsesses about genetics, all of that in plants and in animals, but it's not. The biggest variable of outcomes is the environment and our management and what we do. And so Antler Bio are showing that. They're showing that nature tech, or nature, is the biggest impact on the performance of the yield of the animal. And that's disruptive. That's incredibly disruptive, because that's not the mindset of the industry, of government, of industry. And I think we just need to embrace these kind of holistic solutions, holistic approaches. And that's where tech can really be tech for good. I suppose I come from the camp of some people are scared of AI, but I think, I don't know, have a play with it, ask it some questions. You can kind of, I've asked it to give me really simple answers back of, if you had to kind of save the world, what would you make humans do to kind of, further themselves and or kind of live longer? And it basically points towards sustainable agriculture. And let's be clear, those AIs have been trained on all the available internet data that's out there. It leans heavily to renewable energy, but then when you prompt it and go, you sure, does that really restore the biodiversity and everything else like that? Because no, you're right, this does, because it's been so heavily trained with so much narrative on renewable energy. But it does seem to point towards regenerative agriculture from what I see. So I think the evidence is clear.
I was talking to a client the other day and he was like, it's okay. I've put the question into Chat GPT. I know the answers. I'll send it to you. To be fair, it was to do with rationing some lambs, and it was a very good interpretation of, but then it's the practical side or the different questions. Sure. So it's quite an interesting approach. But I was like, is this the end of me as a consultant now?
No, I think you're going to have superpowers. I think you'll just be able to just service many more, and just, I think my understanding is like, it's the intelligence just goes through the roof. Like, you're able to then kind of manage people from far away, but just like, as long as you can get the context and their data sets into your, let's just say, in the future AIs. But I think what's missing in this space is still data. So yeah, I think some of the solutions that when people talk about putting data in and collecting it, this is where it can be really powerful. I can see like producer groups all joining up, going, hey, let's just share our field boundary data and everything that we did, and then leverage that. But you're going to have to put that information all in a data repository, a farm manager, and then share it. And then arguably that can plug into your kind of recommendation engine. Because you, Liz, as a consultant, you are essentially that AI from your experiences and learning. But now you can now be powered by arguably lots of micro Liz's, micro agents.
So that's not at all terrifying for everybody.
Heaven help.
And I suppose the challenge I've got, and Nick's view is on that initial view of I've met this tech guy person, is that beef and sheep in particularly as an industry have been very tech, not even actively undermining technology that can be within our sector. So if we look at genetics and various things. So, and I suppose that also within ReGen a lot of that is a reaction, or some of the people who are interested in it is a reaction to this very formulaic approach. So they want to break out away from, we just do it like this because this is what we've always done. And that some of the farmers I know within the ReGen world are also quite tech phobic. It's more about natural systems. Our brain, our observation, all of that is what is powerful. We don't need something else. So I'm just intrigued of how it can feel like it's at quite odds of some of the people that we work with. This sort of hyper focus on tech, and tech is the solution. It's a combination, isn't it? But how do you? Is there some examples?
Previous ones have been tech for efficiency, haven't they? In other words, for yield and automation and time saving. So that's where tech can be great, time saving. But it comes back to, I think a lot of solutions haven't been, or products have been brought to farmers, and farmers are great in terms of being embracing them. And I think it's wrong when people say, "Oh, farmers are so hard to sell to." I think no, your product's shit. I think your value proposition is shit. Ultimately,
just explain that a little bit more.
Well, when you're building a product, you want to understand who your user is. Let's say it's a farmer. You want to understand fundamentally how they do their day or their business and their problem, and how much cost is that problem. If you do develop that, what is the value of it? In other words, are you saving 1 hour? Are you removing that input? Now you can't take all of it, but it's like, and also explaining that. So I see a lot of people who having not got that understanding. I do not have that. So this is the kind of things that we interrogate, right? We look into. At the same time, we also help those startups and founders explain that if they have something. But if they're a million miles away, so product market fit is a narrative. Product. Have you got the right product? Have you got for the right market? The farmer or the user, is it big enough? And generally, we generally see most of these things aren't valuable enough. They're incremental, marginally incremental, and they extract from a purse. The wallet that they're selling into, as you both know, is from a very low margin, if not negative value. It's a terrible industry to go for. So we generally are, as investors, completely allergic to any proposition that has a business model that is charging the farmer. Because if we are going to transition this system, we need to be extracting value either within downstream in the value chain, or capturing from predominantly. We want to find solutions or aggregate solutions to bring value back into the food system, because we think food is fundamentally undervalued. So we generally look for those kind of companies who can, like, go back to Audacious. They're going to be charging really the producers and downstream. They might sound like a marketing tool, but it's then going to show the value of food is cheap, and thus you can charge more for it. You can capture more volume. So for us, it's like can like change the value of food. And it's not really a charge on the farmer. It's going to put more money in the pocket of the farmer. Antler Bio, as an example, yes, it does charge arguably the producer, but the value proposition is off the scale. In other words, you spend 2,000 to kind of get your herd's understanding of its blood, its epigenetic profile, its gene expression of it. Is it stressed? Is it dehydrated? What's wrong? What's it deficient in? But the farmers are getting like 80, 90K of value back in like a couple of months. It's like a no-brainer. And if anything, then you want to constantly test, because you want to constantly make sure that things are good, but that cost will come down as well. So if the value proposition has to be like 10x minimum, spend 1,000, get 10,000 back, and you have to be confident in selling it. And that's why it makes it a graveyard of investing in this space, to be clear, right? So I think venture capital in this space hasn't been very successful in the last, since I've been in it. And I suppose that's why I'm trying to, our team and the First 30s prove that you can make high returns in this space we have a very specific thesis, as you know, like focusing on nature tech or enabling regenerative agriculture is very much key as part of that. And we think the timing is right now where like the system is going to change. It's the timing thing as well. But yeah, I've built two products that sell to farmers. And I know it's very, 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 very hard if you don't get the product right.
We are delightful individuals. But do you see, they may not be coming to you, but do you see an interest in people who want to buy farmland and demonstrate to work with people to demonstrate what is possible within the UK or wider?
We are seeing the emergence of farmland funds, or people want to build a fund, like a £200 million fund to go buy farmland. Yeah, I experienced that actually when I was on the farm with the large apple grower. We got approached by a couple of entities to come and buy the farming assets. These were one was a very large investment bank, and it's still there. So that strategy is going to continue because farmland has actually been a fantastic asset for the last, 60, 70 years. It's just outperformed the stock market actually on a basis of, it might not now because the stock market's gone a bit of a tear the last 2 years, but it's generally delivered, I think, something like 11, 12% annually with low volatility. In other words, low, like doesn't go up and down in value. And so it's a very safe place to kind of get good returns. But the strategy I'm seeing is people wanting to buy land to then turn it to improve soil health, basically, because I think it marries with our thesis of that when people start to understand the value of soil health, that it's connected to human health, we can unlock untold productivity from it, then the revenue stream towards those farmlands is going to go through the roof because there's not much of it. And if you can be on the early train of having high soil health in the next 10, 20 years, then arguably a lot of land's going to be knackered, I suppose is a bad word to use, but kind of not very fertile and very vulnerable. So you want to have soil health or nutrient-dense produce in your supply chain to be secure and keep your people healthy and productive. So that's the bet they're making. So yeah, we do work with these entities. We do see it. They come to us because I suppose we're like an enabling tech fund. So we'll invest in the technologies to make that is true, what they believe in as well. So we partner with several, but it's still early, I would say. I feel like talking to some of them, they're still struggling to raise hundreds of millions. Their visions of raising billions under management to buy farmland and transition it. But again, I don't think they have the stewards to manage it, to be honest with you, when I'm talking to them. So I think it's going to evolve. So, but still, I think it's a positive sign. I don't know if people are scared of it or worried about it, but I think it's a positive sign that financial capital's now starting to see that you can get a higher return through just investing in nature and investing in regenerating soils. So I think it's a positive thing. I wouldn't look at it as a negative one, but it shouldn't be at the expense of putting farmers out of business so they aggregate and then you have these large purchases. So I would caution that strategy. But I do see very good funds who are basically buying the land but then keeping the farmer on the land, or they're doing 50-50 deals or 70-30 deals where in the end all they want is just access to the land price appreciation. but they want to inject capital into that farming business and also help them with the offtake agreement. So there's a couple of funds who are doing that, but there's not many of them. I want to see more of that personally, where you're kind of injecting fresh capital to help them transition to regenerative agriculture, providing them with that buffer to kind of transition across. But if you can align it with a really good off-taker, and that's where I think Liz will go back to brands and off-takers like the Wild Farms and the Wild Hair Group and things like that, who can kind of provide that cushion to transition. I think they're going to be the winners long term.
And I suppose the challenges you associate with that, with non-farming companies buying in land, which is it then just goes to trees, or
right.
Then with the next thing is they're going to introduce some links, or do you mean it's more of a rewilding approach necessary to land management rather than this? Actually, we can produce food, we can do all sorts of things. We don't have to go to the extreme ends of everything goes to trees or everything goes to deer. Whatever. So it's trying to. It's sort of we've experienced these really knee-jerk reactions, haven't we? Which is we've got to save it by preserving it in aspect, but actually we can do so much high quality things by farming it well.
Totally agree. I think there are places where land shouldn't be definitely farmed. I don't have the answer where that is, but there's definitely places of land like around here in Kent which probably shouldn't be best place to be farmed, but I'm not in the position to suggest where that is. But let's look at the data and look at the information to make that decision. But it shouldn't be sledgehammer approach at all. Every field is different from what I see, and it's going to be hard. It's going to be messy because arguably things are all in the wrong place. Like we're growing things and food in the wrong places. So I think the best thing to do is just incentivize the market to make the right decision versus those kind of binary decisions of rewilding or not farming. They're not the same. They can be both done in partnership or together. Like, so again, going back to what we see in our data is food farming basically with nature is the best play. So I'm leaning to not advocating for rewilding. Rewild definitely land that you just can't grow edible crops from, for sure, for humans. But the land that it
intrigues me about that is, can it not grow now? Because it's so, do you mean it's been depleted that it's got to a point where actually it does need to be, it goes into some sort of a rewilding or fallow or whatever the phrase you wish to use. Your action is about how do you get that soil back to a condition where it can, or the rotations you've been using for the last 30, 40 years are not sustainable. So it's, for me, some of it is that you do have to, there's a land healing element, isn't it, to it?
Yeah.
Actually, the outcome could be in another 5 to 10 years, we can be growing crops on this land and we're not exploitative of it because we understand it more. So I see a lot of people who are converting arable land into grassland to graze with livestock. My question is, so in 5 years, will you grow crops again? And they're like, no. It's like, but in a lot of mixed farming, the approach was always that land in grass built up fertility and then you harvested it for 2 or 3 years and then put it back into grass. So is seeing a lot of people going out of crops, and then never shall go back into it, which it may all change depending on what the price might do or options for markets and all of that. But people are making quite dramatic land use decisions currently.
I think I sense was what you described there. What will probably happen? The majority is you can't predict out what the market looks like in 5 years. I suppose the off-take agreement might be there to put it back into croppable to make that confidence. It's easy to say now I won't do it, but as long as the optimization metric is soil health, and then they're doing that for a reason, right? So, but
the practical side is that you've sold all the kit. Do you mean so? There is an element that some of those farmers have basically, there's obviously opportunities for contractors and all of that, but they've also taken an opportunity to liquidise. That's not the right word. Liquidate.
So they're like harvesting the harvest. Yeah, the
not
assets.
Liquidise. Exactly. That's a whole different thing. So it appears to be a decision that's very difficult to come back into cropping, but as you say, it may change.
All this comes down to because the value of the crop is too low.
Yeah.
It's all it comes down to. But yeah, I remember looking into, like, let's take the harvester, the combine harvester, for example. Like, I think it officially runs at like a negative return on investment, but you have to basically invest into us. You can't compete. In theory, basically everyone should be sharing this asset, but you can't all share an asset which everyone wants at the same time. But it's just like, because the crop is so, that asset is so expensive and the crop is so too cheap, basically. This is the problem that we're in. But fundamentally, yeah, I think what will eventually happen is you will have a different tool set. But that only happens when I think the value of the crop changes and the value of the product changes. I don't think we're going to get here through keeping prices depressed, artificially depressed. So I think you're going to see, again, I go back to healthy soils, nutrient dense, healthy buyer. You know, I'm a health buyer. I want to buy for nutrient density and feed my kids healthy products. That's going to really change the cash flows and the market demand towards those farms. And then you'll see the value of the crop change. And then we'll see a rewiring, I think, of the machinery, the value of the machinery on the land, anything else. Again, I go back to AI and everything else. I think we're going to see in the next 10 years, just look at automobiles, cars. We've gone from German engineering, of like, you need German engineering, it's the best, to now you can make making a car now is like an iPhone, or anyone can make a phone. It's like a mobile phone. Anyone can make a car today and produce one quite quickly. The Chinese are throwing off cars, which we've like half the price of what we get here. The German economy is now potentially in massive trouble because they can't compete with what's happening in Asia and Tesla and everything else like that. That is a real rewiring of like who's in. So I think you'll have that moment also in agriculture. It's just a hardware, it's a robotics and an automation thing, which then those who are kind of, I suppose, keeping that croppable system in play, you know, taxing the kind of farmers, they have to rely on this heavy machinery. I think that's going to change in the next 10 years. I do. But before that happens, it's the value of the food and the produce has to change. And that will come through likes of nutrient density, health, food is medicine. I think that's what will be the first wave. Before, you don't need that machinery first, but when you start getting demand towards your products, I mean, I'm enlightened, right? I've seen the evidence and the data. And once we make this data more available, I just don't see why we see it, right, in regenerative agriculture. Once people go down the rabbit hole and understand that this food is different and it's better for you, people want to eat it. Then there's the whole convenience aspect, right? Don't get me wrong, but that can be enabled. It's just a matter of time.
Yeah, we often talk about Nic's eggs being sort of the entry drug. So once you've eaten good eggs, you can't ever go back.
I can concur. I haven't had Nic's eggs, but I do source from around here some. I try to source from they're called Lamb down in Kent. A shout out to them, but they do regenerative eggs. They have a mobile coop moving, and the eggs just taste completely different. It's just like, it's so tasty. So tasty.
But just on that, what are your thoughts on the future of white meat, pigs and chicken and pork?
I go back to data I've seen. So if you're gonna eat meat, as I understand, I'm using the omega-3, omega-6 ratio, right? Go back to omega-6 is inflammatory. You need it, but then omega-3 is anti-inflammatory for our bodies, and you need a balance. And from what I've seen on the tests on those animals, if you're going to eat any meat, the worst omega-6, omega-3 ratio. So, just to dial back as well, I think a lot of our chronic diseases that we're seeing in the economy or the population is from inflammation. So a lot of foods are inflammatory, okay? It could be sugars, it could be anything else. So which animal, if you just buy off the shelf, seemingly seems to have the least inflammation? Or the worst culprit, as I understand, is pigs. It's something like, this is taken from research from the Bionutrient Association, I believe. It's like pigs is like a 40-to-1 like ratio of like omega-6 to omega-3, as I understand, 30 to 40. Chickens is the next worst culprit. It's like 20. The best is meat, like beef. So irrespective of if it's pasture or conventional, it's like 7-to-1 beef. So if you're going to have anything, have beef. So I personally, really slowed down my pigs and chicken consumption.
But on the carbon calculator, they're tremendous.
Yeah, I suppose you're talking to someone who's realised that the carbon calculation is very, very unfair and poorly calculated and using poor quality data. So I chucked that in the bin. So I know you called carbon calling.
I know.
We're investigating a name change. It's fine.
But the carbon should be back in the soil for sure. I totally agree. Call that carbon back into the soil for sure. I'm totally agree on that. But no, that's where Nick, I have a real problem with it. So once you see like the thing I care about as a parent, and now understanding my own personal health, I'm like, I just want to have things that make less inflammatory. I don't want to get a chronic disease when I'm older. I want to see my kids grow up. I don't want to be. I've got back pain at the moment. I want to be playing with them. I want to get this back pain down. So but then in that, oh, by the way, the best as I saw in this data was I think sheep and venison. I think venison was the best.
Oh, it'd be amazing.
Venison was the best. It's anti-inflammatory. No surprise. It's eating naturally.
It just can be quite dry.
Yeah, fine. Venison sausage rolls. Oh my goodness.
Oh, I'm not a fan of venison.
No? Oh, okay. I really enjoyed those. But pastry, okay, bad. But wild farm pastry, there we go. But then when you actually then dissect that and go, okay, as you say, your eggs, pasture-raised chickens, anti-inflammatory. Like, I'm making big, bold statements here and everything else like that, but I'm just trying to make it so clear and obvious. Plant-based, naturally fed animals, just the natural ingredients, seem to have a higher omega-3 ratio, which is basically arguably anti-inflammatory or balanced for them as well as ourselves. You should eat those ones.
But the trouble is, both Liz and I have grown our own pasture-raised hens. They obviously have grain as well, and they are amazing, like out of this world. Everyone wants them, but they need to be 20, 25 quid a chicken.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when you think, oh, who's going to... There's only so many people that will buy that.
But for me...
You need less of it, though, don't you? You need less of it, arguably.
And that's the attitude towards chicken, isn't it? Which is not that we want to go necessarily back to the 1940s or 30s, which is chicken was a treat, wasn't it? Once a month type act, like if that, because of the... and now how many kilos everybody's eating means that that appetite can't be satisfied by pasture-raised chickens. Well, you can. It's going to cost you a fortune.
But if you added up the pollution cost, the obesity cost,
exactly.
I guess I wonder how much that equates to each chicken that's been.
Which we all accept, but we are the converted, aren't we? Hallelujah, praise the Lord. But for me, why I do the pastured chicken initially was because nobody sees chickens. So part of it was an educational piece to say, actually, this is a different way of producing chicken. But I don't produce enough to satisfy everybody's chicken requirements. But part of the reason is I'm not doing it for that. I'm doing it to challenge people's thoughts.
Mm. It's definitely an educational piece for sure. Like speaking here as a converter, as you say, educate or learnt that this seems to be a superior, better product for our health. So like I think it's a school education thing. It's an advertising thing. There's a whole definitely an educational piece. There is no silver bullet here, but you need everyone pulling in that direction. But again, I go back to the data. Once you start to point this out, make this easy and freely available, then it becomes standard. It becomes natural. I think we're seeing generations like, well, I think our generation or the Gen X or the Gen Z are the first ones to ever like turn the packet over and have a look. Like my parents don't do that. It's just like it becomes a generational thing as people become more understanding of this thing. They question and ask more kind of questions. And again, I go back to I think we'll have tools in our pockets. We can kind of go, "Hey AI,
how far off do you think is the zapper on your phone in the supermarket?"
I'm going to do an Elon Musk and say like something outrageous, like 4 or 5 years.
Okay.
And there's nothing stopping it. It's just pulling together the right actors and the right parties who do go this way, the producer groups, the brands, and go, let's do this. Let's enable it. So the good thing about go back to Audacia is what they're doing is they're creating benchmarks. So there'll be an organization will pay for them who paid for the first beef one, go and take all the beef, all the milk, donut milk as well, in the supermarket and create the benchmark. And then those producer groups can go, oh, I'm up here, top right corner. Where are you? And then that just creates that kind of, the problem is that you turn that packet around today and those ingredients are generic, number, which has come from an old study but no one's updated on. So that, the carrot is the usual example, but it's like some of those carrots have absolutely none of those nutrients in it. Some have incredibly lots of them. So you're basically playing bingo in the supermarket. Well, I don't think many people want to play bingo. I want to pay for what I get for. So if I'm going to pay £4 of chicken, I want the best. And then, if you're going to choose the other one, the KFC one, you're getting crap. That's your decision as a consumer. But I think majority of people, once you surface the information, will make the right decision. And no brand or no entity would want to kind of surface. They will start losing revenue. All I can say right now is those major players are losing revenue. I'm referring to the PepsiCos, Nestle's, and everyone else. You can look at all their earnings. They're all slowing down because this seemingly seems to be a consumer is becoming more health conscious, or people are all on Ozempic and Wegovy and taking the jab and eating less. Whichever way you look at it, even when they start taking the jab, they then understand it's the food that's creating the issue. So it's actually a positive thing. I think we're in a point where we're going to have dramatic changes in supply chains on the health side. So yeah, I can understand your pain, both of you. Like, where's the buyers? But I think they're coming.
I think, and sort of we had also when we were on that panel, we were talking about that connecting suppliers to, it happened to be food service, didn't it, in terms of how, if we want regenerative products to do it at scale, we sell direct off the farm, both Nick and I, but that isn't going to satisfy a restaurant in London, is it? It's how do you connect the range of people, the network of regenerative approach people to the people who want 2,000 eggs a day, whatever the numbers are. And I think what's interesting about this is it's moving away from this very practice-led, everybody's got to do the same thing, to actually the outcome is quality. And it might vary over the season depending on what's happening on the farm. But I think it's an interesting way of approaching it.
Yeah, I think we talked about it. Like there was a gentleman on there who was from a restaurant and was saying he was struggling to kind of find the regenerative produce for the restaurant. What I experienced when I was on farm, and I saw it again inside Walmart and other places, was I was quite shocked about in the supply chain. So we created all the apples, stuck them in the stores, and yet we would get a spreadsheet every day from our marketing desk or from Tesco saying, we need these apples in 24 hours, this shape, size, and everything else like that. And I was like, and then we had a team of about 6 or 7 running around managing a spreadsheet. So we're like, you need a real-time feed to our stores or to our fields, really, of what we have for sale and what's the prices. But it's almost like we're stuck in the dark ages on that perspective of just getting real-time feeds, live visibility to where food is and where it's available. And that causes a lot of the wastage in itself. But then if you flip it the other side, if farmers had live connections to all the buyers out there, you don't then need to be stuck, arguably, in this linear supply chain. There could be these other buyers out there who would actually want that. But again, the infrastructure hasn't been there. So this is the kind of things that we do invest in as well, is like, it's called like APIs, automated program interface, where live connection between our farming ERP system, our management system, and our buyers management system. And that just takes away then this need for constant spreadsheet sharing. It's just a live feed and it's huge efficiency. But then also you can have a live feed to all your producer groups. Hey, what price are you getting? What price are you getting? What price are you getting? And then together you can kind of make the right decision. We used to sit there picking up the phone, trying to find what the price is on the market, and this is like before my days in the stock market. This is what they were doing in 1990. Let's meet down the pub. What price did you get? It's like we're still stuck there. And I just don't, again, it's not the farmer's fault or anything else. I think there's certain people in the system who are very happy for this information unfairness or arbitrage is the word I like to use, but it doesn't need to be like that. So again, we've invested in a company called Serve, who is basically putting in these connections between wholesalers and producers and wholesalers and retailers. And people are signing up, and they're just having huge efficiencies and saving time, but then having able to kind of get more visibility. And the crux of all of this is just visibility. And we did it during COVID, to be clear. And I was on the farm during COVID, and I saw then, like, we went from no visibility to like loads of visibility in the food system, because we just got on the phone, right, and talked to your supply chain every 2 hours, and the whole food system mobilized. I mean, there wasn't issues. There was supposedly going to be issues, but there really wasn't, because actually everyone was just sharing their data, right? So I think we can do that digitally today. And I think that's how we can level the playing field there. So Liz, going back to I do see this world where once you connect the fields live, real time, to end buyer, to the restaurant, restaurants will be able to push the button and say, I want nutrient-dense lettuce, tomato, and that will send a message to those who had that supply. And then it will just be about sending a message to a driver, delivery person, to go pick up that produce and bring it here. We have the Ubers, we have all these parts that are there. We just haven't got the visibility to the field. And I think, again, in 5 years' time, we're going to be in a place where, again, your produce will be sought after, and you'll know you've got the only pasture-raised chicken available in the local area. And you say, well, that's my price. Come hit the bid. Hit my bid's here, and you can come and hit it. I think we'll be there soon, but you just need to surface your availability into a marketplace, which then allows you to kind of not be stuck in your supply chain. But I know I speak very positive, and I know it's all sounds like roses, but I see the tech is there. It's not mythical stuff. I think robotics in the field is much harder. I'm talking about simple, available solutions today. So Nick, going back to your point about Audacious, what they can do, I've seen, there is a model already. They can just scan and know if something's been grass-fed or not by seeing like a vitamin E level. They see enough evidence, it seems, that like you only get high vitamin E levels if it's been pasture-raised, truly pasture-raised, not finished, as I understand. But that model's ready now to go. You don't need all the other nutrients. This is just the one thing everyone wants to check for, right? It's just, is it pasture or not? So again, it's just about finding that very cheap. I said 5 years, but it could be 2 years. Who knows? But like, it's just being practical and commercial about what is the thing you really, really need to kind of sell this product. And this is where Carbon, I think, falls down. It's like, what do you really, really need to do to meet your objective? Is it for marketing reasons? Or is it truly to get that number down, or whatever it may be? So
Anthony, I'm just conscious of time, but if someone is if some founders, I've got to use the lingo, beavering away, I've got this amazing idea. Well, they think it's an amazing idea. It might be crap, but how do they just contact you directly on LinkedIn?
Yeah, definitely. Reach out to me on LinkedIn or Antony@tft.vc. But I do get a lot of stuff in my inbox, which I can be rubbish at kind of getting back to, because obviously some people just send you stuff which is clearly not nature focused, or clearly not, let's say improving soil health.
Want to go to the Maldives, holiday related. Some new dog coin or something like crypto, I don't know. But no, LinkedIn. But at the same time, it's not just us. There's other great investors in this space as well. But I can also, the one thing, I've been on that side, and I will definitely try and respond, as well as try and point them in the right direction. I think it's being regenerative. It's like, add value all the time. And I think we need more of those types of people. But no, reach out, go to our website, tft.vc. You can also contact some of the other guys. I think I'm the most responsive, though, to be honest. Some of my other colleagues, and this is a dig at them, and they know that. But they're just not as talkative as I am. It just must be you don't quite know what's coming, but it must be exciting, because you must just meet so many different people and incredibly passionate people about potentially a shit idea, but at least they're passionate.
No, I'm not criticizing shit idea.
I am, it's fine.
Yeah, and that's why I left. I honestly, like, when I made a decision to leave the financial, the city, or whatever it may be, that's the best thing I ever did, because you've got to kind of spend time with people like yourselves. More importantly, it's like, you guys are the true asset managers and the true risk managers that are out there.
But do you think that when you look at farmers' return on capital, do you think we're all at a, I was going to say a very bad word then, but do you think we're all really not great business people? As in, lots of farmers have a huge amount of capital. The return is teeny weeny in comparison to what, if you took that capital, you could go and, I'll do this, that, and the other. Do you think we're all bonkers?
Well, I think your access to return on capital opportunities haven't been there. Do you know what I mean? Or it's kind of stacked against you. Like, you can't just go, you could just go stick it in the stock market, right? Stop farming and stick it in the stock market, but you don't, because it's the family tradition. It's also it's what you do on a day-to-day basis, and you look for return on capital. But it's always just previously has been very much on gut or intuition, which has been right. But then it's also, I suppose, was on, I think many years ago, on much smaller parts of land, and now it's become bigger and larger, and so that feel has gone. I think it's been harder to get that feel and gut, but I'm not taking it away from anyone. But no, I don't think, it's just not having enough information to support that larger scale, I think. And I think if just a bit more data we'd be supportive and can make a better decision. So no, I think they're very good at managing risks which are unquantified, like pollination, carbon, all these other ecosystem services. I think they're absolutely superb at that. We just haven't put a value on those things yet. And I think that we are going to start putting values on them. We are starting to, right? So no, I disagree that they're shit business people, but they're very good at understanding the return on total investment, if you want to, which is going to be changing, right? Investment will include natures. It's going to start including it.
And we're very stoic. I think that's part of it, is that we just keep going.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I think I like the reframing that we manage risk. But I think some of it is that there's like a whole value piece that sits beside it, or why do we do it? Legacy, respect, pride, all of that stuff. It's a really highly complex system of why people farm, and we keep going based on.
Other people know that, and they're taking the piss.
Exactly. Yeah.
Those in the supply chain and those in government, I don't know, but like, it's quite clearly, from what I've seen, people have leveraged off that passion and understanding where your situation is at, and they know that. They're not stupid.
Yeah, well, they're in total control, aren't they? We sold some cull cows recently, and we'd sold them as just like direct to the abattoir, and it just struck me that they just tell you what the price is. There's no negotiation in the commodity market. It's like, this is what it is.
Exactly, that's what we need to change. It's not a commodity. It's Nic's eggs, and they're different price because they're different quality, and this is what's going to happen. It will change. It's going to decommodify and puts the power back on those who are closest to the soil or closest to nature, who can iterate their product. I think you guys are in a position of advantage. Again, you're talking to someone who's trying to enable the things that you guys are doing. But no, I'm obviously advocating for it, because I think it's going to happen. I'm betting that it's going to happen.
And I think what's interesting is the range of skills, isn't it? That the farmers need a range of skills. So I always joke that not that me, because I can't weld, but welding in the morning, carving cows in the afternoon, planting hedges in the evening. But all of a sudden, we have to now be very aware of better marketing. But I think it's ensuring that it's about how do we get the most value for what we are putting into that system. And that, I think, in people, there's been a shame attached to that.
Yes.
Being more in control of the market piece, definitely.
Yeah, and I think a really good point on one is you definitely have a different product, but like, I think also the barriers before on like, let's just say, engineering or software engineering or all this other things are now flawed. Again, go back to marketing as well. I think the accessibility, like you guys now doing this influencer podcast, right? You're influencing, and go back to Kun Fan Sai on investing in ReGen Ag. Sorry to point to another podcast, but he's influencing, he's driving capital to a place. And so we've moved in those last 10, 20 years of like single or individuals can move markets. We see it in sport. The football players now are the ones who are kind of, for example, paid the big money. The football club has lost, the brand is not the club anymore. It's the individual. You see it on YouTubers and everything. So there is a shift happening. So it's become much more accessible, I think, for people like yourself to get a voice out there and get your message out there and commercialize it as well. So the barriers to all of this previously for farming is coming down and coming down fast, from marketing through to, before. I tell you right now, like I've never coded really in my life. You think I'm a techie. I've never wrote a single piece of code. Well, I have wrote code, but not very much compared to my colleagues. But I can honestly now go into one of these AIs and tell it I want to build this app, and I can spin up an MVP very quickly. I can spin up a carbon calculator in seconds.
A random number generator, is that what you were referring to?
No. But like the methodologies are out there. All this stuff is open source. Like it's not like it's so accessible now. It's just. I'll just say to people, just go out there and experiment. But it's like before, I remember saying, God, we're going to have to get data analysts, data engineers, people who can do algorithms on farms. I don't think you need to. We're not going to need to. We really won't need to. It's going to be so out of fingertips. It's going to be like literally click and play in the next 4 or 5 years. This thing is moving at pace, and this makes it the playing field is leveling out. That's what I'm trying to say. It's going to be easier and easier to get. We're seeing it in politics, changes of governments and everything else like that. People have to move through just information sharing, truth sharing, and have influence. So anyway, I'm positive for the farming industry anyway.
How are you feeling, Nick?
I feel better after this chat.
Good.
No longer looking like you've got a hoover up your ass as you were earlier.
No, the hoover up the arse was that more my energy's been sucked out. It was nothing else.
Thank you for the clarification.
Did you not have any eggs for breakfast?
No, I've had a lot of eggs. No, I haven't had. Rena's just brought me some toast, but I've seen a lot of eggs already this morning. Actually, a lot of eggs. No, I think I've enjoyed this chat a lot, and I think my dislike of tech people is more balanced now, as in some of them are all right.
Just got to have a conversation, haven't we? Just got to have a good long conversation. If any shouting happens,
we haven't got time to get into it, but it's the Bill Gates, it's the daffodil dust, it's all that kind of stuff that really gets my back up. It's putting a sticker on things. Whereas I think you're coming from the root of the problem, literally, and starting off at the soil level, and that gives me hope.
That could be a test. Could be say, do you know what a nematode is?
Yes.
No, that could be the test to these tech people.
Just panicking for a moment.
Do you know what nematode is? Do you know what bacteria is? Do you know what fungi is? And do you know how they interact? And if they can't answer that question, like out.
And some of it is just the talking bit is talking to farmers or engaging with, or is that it's that sort of your appreciation because of your experience of realizing that it's not all moon dust and whatever, and moonlight and delight, is it? It's hard work and all of those factors. So I think it's just that the awareness that sits, and that we don't necessarily want everything. Oh, it's fine. We'll just solve it with this. It's like, but how is that going to replicate the range of skills that we're trying to get people to recognize they have?
We maybe need to come up with. So they've got greenwashing. We need to come up with a good word for this kind of work. As in
papering over the cracks.
Opposite of greenwashing.
Okay.
Truth.
That's our mission for the next few days.
I think greenwashing, the people just need to, if they're greenwashing, it's just like, show me the data then. Show me the absolute evidence. Just ask people to it's like when you see these regenerative commitments, it's like, can we just put it into context and specific? Like, okay, you bring 1 million hectares into production, but how many, now tell us, you can only make that claim, how many hectares of production do you take from? One, they don't even know. And so that already calls them out. If you don't even know your total hectares of production, otherwise you don't have traceability, sorry, you can't make that claim. You cannot reference any other number and confuse us with large numbers. Because, you know, like I try and call it out, but just like, you know, these claims, like you actually look at the commitments, the carbon commitments of like 3 or 4 million, or we're going to put to these programs, but it's like 0.01% of that company's revenue. So it's not a commitment. It's a joke. So like, I think you need to back up with context any of these greenwashing claims. And then any claim needs to be then underpinned by statistical significance. In other words, you know, is that, you know, statistically true that you've kind of got 2 tons of carbon, for example, and no one can get to that number. No, it's not. It's so hard to be that confident. So because people haven't got this statistical capability to underwrite that claim. So yeah, sorry, but greenwashing just needs to be just validated with just context and data, and just and open source it. Just be open with it. If you've got nothing to hide, then just share us all the information.
Evidence-based. Well, no, just
evidence-based. Yeah.
I am also finding I am generally I was having a bit of an existential crisis before Christmas, but I think it was because I was a bit poorly. But I think it is about the massive amount of opportunity to get it at. It's the scale piece, and moving away from endless conversations about definitions. Moving to this idea of actually we can measure it. We can measure it from a satellite or an indication from a satellite, and we can measure an indication from a zappy thing that might be on our phone in 5 years. So we're moving away from this. We're not doing that because it's all that bit it wears you down. The sort of practice-based, which practices are better than the others piece wears you down.
Yeah, I come back to thinking, okay, if you're going to ask farmer to change practice, can I just be absolutely clear? What are you going to give for that change? And it's always something like, 30, 40 quid a hectare. And it's just like, again, put it into context and perspective. That's not going to do anything. It's not going to cover anything. And then what's the cost of getting to that measure, that outcome? And it's usually 30, 40 quid a hectare anyway. So it's like, it's a non-starter. So I think farmers should just be brave enough and just go like, what are you going to give me for changing the specification? And usually I believe these people driving these programs don't have an answer because they're actually working with tiny budgets and they're actually reporting to a marketing desk. That's what I found, or they don't really know what they want. They're just they're in their role and they just need to tick a box and need to deliver this program. But then when it goes any higher,
make you really angry. I had a situation before Christmas. This is possibly what drove my existential crisis, right. Engaging with someone within a supply chain, and their complete and utter lack of awareness or knowledge, yet declaring stuff to be true just because they'd read it somewhere, just made me very angry.
Yeah, I think kick back, do that you just said there. Just like, show me the data, show me the evidence that is true. But no, I suppose I've tried to build these programs, I've tried to build these systems, and I've seen it to be not. There's a lack of business cases, a lack of information to really even make that decision. I come back to it's why we're trying to invest in the data first. Let's improve the data, and then we can make better decisions. But before that, you're trying to find this silver bullet in there, which you should do that. What is absolutely clear is it's not the same everywhere. So we all agree that you can't commodify this system. So I think it goes back to fundamental, just accepting that soil is different everywhere. The context is always different. Nature's always different. And that means we have you can't commodify this thing. And until that individual, that entity and organization accepts that, I think you're always going to have that rub, Liz, I reckon, is you don't accept that my farm is different to Nick's farm. And it will always be different because the product is different. And there is ways of showing that end product is different, but you don't value that. That's fine. We can continue in this conversation, but then me, Liz, I'm going to go find someone who does care and value that. And so Nick, going back to your kind of what you founders come out, I love working with producer groups, brands, who want to do this and make a change, or end farmers who want to be, always happy to speak to them as well, and also point you guys in the right directions of solutions that are doing the right thing, as well as if you see stuff, happy to have a look at it and work with you and test it and iterate it. And is it actually working for the farmer or not?
Well, there is somewhere, I haven't got the energy, but there is a pastured egg behind Dairy Cow's brand. But I haven't got the the to do it.
Pastured egg.
As in, you want the energy to.
So say a
dairy
milk,
cow.
Yeah, a dairy company like, I don't really want to say Arla, but that's the only one. So I don't know, a dairy company, all their dairy cows who are grazed outside have 1,000 chickens or 500 chickens that follow behind the cows in rotation, and then those eggs are then obviously pastured, soya-free, palm oil-free eggs. Because free-range eggs, there's a whole array of free-range eggs, and most people can't get good eggs. But anyway, that's a whole different thing. But that's because everyone eats eggs.
Nick's eggs go global. We've got the name for it and everything.
I think free range has done quite well, hasn't it? I mean, as a case study, hasn't it?
Yeah, but it's not free range. So that's
true. No, don't disagree. Don't disagree. Again, let's go back. Let's measure it. I reckon let's create a benchmark of the egg data. Let's do a study and show all the average eggs on the shelf, and then let's test those eggs you talked about. And I high bet the house that they are in the top quartile, if not one of the best eggs out there. And then they can just market that. Market that. Where's your eggs on this index?
And I think the bit that's interesting, particularly about that model, is that it's an opportunity for local people to buy food off that farm, because most of the milk won't. The direct sell of that milk is, if you're within that main milk bar, is not possible. So it's that reconnection piece is also part of it.
Well, I'm getting my own eggs soon. I'm going to get my own chickens after the information I've seen.
For me, I think it's to do with accessing bugs and beasties. I think that makes it's having actually some animal protein in the diet. That's my theory.
But there's also a saving of there isn't the pollution from intensive free range production. So there's there's a credit somewhere down the line, because you're not.
But it's also the expectation that if people are involved in those production systems, it completely changes their attitude towards food waste. It changes their attitude to all different elements of that food system. That's what interests me, is they don't just chuck stuff away because they realise how bloody hard it is to get it there.
Go back to those chickens in those indoor systems, as you say, are they're omega-6 rich, so they're kind of inflammatory. The ones outdoors, or the ones animals fed nitrogen-rich grass, again, you see a difference in the kind of the outcomes of the meat or the milk, and also maybe the chickens as well. So, as I understand it, is I think What Your Food Ate, the book. Is it What Your Food Ate? They kind of talk about it it's like nitrogen is like kind of growing obese plants, as I understand it. So would you want to, if we had to eat each other, would you want to eat an obese person, or do you want to eat, I don't know, an Olympic athlete? Sorry to take it to cannibalism to end the podcast, but
why not?
I'm worried an Olympic athlete might taste a bit like venison. I'd want a middle of the road.
Bit of sauce, nothing wrong with a bit of sauce.
Anyway. Have a ribeye steak, some marbling.
Some marbling is good, but generally, I think you're going to not be healthy eating obese people.
Good to know.
Not going to sit next to it. You choose who you sit next to on the plane in case it crashes, so then you've got to eat them.
Those are different things,
Anyway, thank you. I enjoyed that.
Thank you. Thank you. I always enjoy when me and Liz did the panel. These panels are not online, but it was 20-30 minutes. You can never go deep on this topic. I think that's why Liz was just like, right, we need to talk.
And I think it's that the opportunities are out there, aren't they? And although I was accusing them of flitting somewhere else, the sexy people are here right now. So what can we do together? That's the bit that's interesting.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for listening to the ReGen Ag podcast. Huge thanks to our sponsor, Tim Nicholson from Cactus Tree Guards, Reno for the music, and Pete Ord, the podcast wizard from the studio at Sunbeams, part of the Annie Mawson Sunbeams Music Trust. See you next time.